Segment.com has been a dominant player of customer data platforms for many years. But in 2025, things look a little bit different. New competitors, the rise of AI, stricter privacy laws, and many other things are starting to challenge Segment's dominance. And many businesses are starting to rethink their stacks. Is Segment.com still worth it? Let's dive in and find out. So what's changed since Segment was released many years ago? Well, several things. The first is there's more competitors. We can really talk about two categories of competitors. There is, of course, the direct competitors. You can think of someone like RudderStack. Here's the website. They don't charge based on MTUs, they charge on events, which can be more flexible for some companies. But RudderStack does very similar things to Segment.com. You, of course, have mParticle, Amperity. It's a few other major players now. Segment is not the only player in the space. Let's call them direct competitors. But you also have what I would consider light CDPs. For example, if we look at Mixpanel and Amplitude, let's look at Mixpanel first. We can see that Mixpanel now has a bunch of integrations that can pull data into Mixpanel and pull data out. So effectively, Mixpanel starts to function as a light version of a CDP. It doesn't mean it's a full-on replacement for a Segment.com, but I am seeing more companies say, you know what, maybe we don't need a Segment.com. We're gonna take a data warehouse, and I'll show you why more in a second. And we're going to use Mixpanel to kind of do some of this integration work that we care about. Amplitude is also very similar. Here are all the integrations that Amplitude supports. You can see this quite a bit. It's so many integrations that you actually need some kind of way to kind of filter them through, right? Lots and lots of players. Amplitude has more integrations than Mixpanel. So a tool like Amplitude could function as a light CDP, and honestly, quite strongly, right? You can do a lot of this ingestion and sending data forward that Segment.com has been known for many years. But the third kind of competitor are what I would consider sort of whole new different approaches. This is really the world of like high touch census. They really made popular this idea of a reverse ETL, where instead of sending data through Segment, that is events, event properties, user properties, you're gonna store all your data in the data warehouse, which many companies already do, and you're gonna then pull from the data warehouse, write in simple SQL queries, and then that data gets sent to where it needs to go, destinations. So for example, you may have purchase data in your data warehouse with the purchase revenue, the items that were purchased, the customer information like the ID, the emails. You write this reverse ETL SQL query, and then each of those rows becomes an event, and you can send it to something like a Facebook ads, Google ads, Mixpanel, Amplitude, and so forth. So the reverse ETL is becoming more popular. Now Segment supports reverse ETL, of course, but reverse ETL only players, and especially players that have been around for a long time, typically have an edge when it comes to this functionality. And this is very attractive for teams that already have data and they don't have to think about instrumenting a whole new set of data. We of course see the rise of AI as a second thing. If you go to the Segment homepage, we can see that the AI revolution has arrived to Segment in some way, right? I mean, it's right here and in the top headline. We see it here in the sub headlines, and you kind of see it everywhere. Now, AI is being used, I'll show you a little bit more in a second. There's a way to create audiences through natural language. There's of course the use of sort of machine learning, which I guess today we might call it AI, to try to improve targeting of users. For example, trying to predict when the user might churn or high LTV users. But Segment has started to bolt on AI, not really build it from the ground up, as I think we're gonna see some new players come in. And thirdly, we have to talk about privacy. GDPR, which has been around now for almost 10 years, equivalence in the US and different states, is making data collection harder, and is rethinking some companies say, you know what, maybe we don't need to put data in some kind of third-party vendor. Can we just keep it in some kind of warehouse that we control, that we have a higher SLA or higher expectations about? So this kind of changes are starting to challenge the dominance that Segment.com has had for many years. It doesn't mean it's going away, doesn't mean it's a bad tool. It just means that for many companies, they're starting to rethink the role of a Segment in their stacks. So what is Segment doing to stay ahead of the competition? There's a few things. Let me show you some of them. Now we're here in the workspace I have here in Segment. The first thing the Segment has is it's just reliable. I use it across 20, 30 different projects. I never really have to worry about data being dropped or issues with payloads. The reliability is very, very high in a tool like Segment.com. This is, again, just a demo workspace I have, but again, from a reliability perspective and the ability to move data and activate data quickly, Segment is just fantastic for that. Now we also have, of course, the sources and destinations, right? Let me see if I can show you those. This is the bread and butter of the Segment world, the catalog effectively, right? We have lots of sources, lots of destinations. They're always adding more. I mean, there must be now 300 plus types of connections here. And typically, if you have a pretty standard stack, you have a HubSpot, a Salesforce, Facebook ads, Google ads, and mixed funnel amplitude, you're gonna all work quite nicely. If you have legacy stuff, it's a little trickier. There's a few ways to bring data in, but standard stacks can really get up and running very quickly. And when it comes together to put together a stack of 5, 6, 7 tools, it's very easy to connect them all into Segment. It's all gonna work pretty well. It's very well supported. That's great documentation. So this is just a huge plus for Segment. Third, of course, is scales. I have seen Segment installations that go up to millions and millions of events per minute, per hour. It scales very, very well. Pricing may be a concern. We'll see that in the cons, but from a scalability perspective, I wouldn't worry about data being dropped. I find the availability is high at the low levels and at the high levels. The fourth thing is there are some AI things coming in. So if you have Segment and you're using it and you're really committed to it, all these AI additions, like some of those use cases I mentioned earlier, like trying to predict churn or predict LTV, can be very powerful because you already have it in, and even though it's kind of bolted on, it can be quick to deploy. Perhaps not as much functionality, but you can do it very quickly. Now, what are some of the limitations? First, pricing is always a limitation. How much will Segment cost you compared to the rest of your stack? Especially, from technical engineer perspective, they might say, can we just do this ourselves? I would say that generally the pricing kind of always works out on a positive manner. You get a positive return on investment, but it's still a concern nonetheless. There is that growing scrutiny over data sharing. Even though data passes through Segment, there might be questions around where is the data being stored? Is there retention of data? How does it fit with the privacy laws? It's just extra complexity for companies that may want to simplify their privacy requirements. Some of the new functionality like reverse ETL, which can work, it's a bit limited. Like some of the reverse ETL models are not as fully featured as what you might find with like a high touch or census. So they're adding these new things, but they're not as powerful as what they might be if you went with a provider that kind of pioneered this concept or is known for this concept. And there is a lengthy implementation here. You have to implement events and properties, you have to test it. I would say this takes at least a month or two to kind of get up and running for a proof of concept, maybe more if you're not familiar with the Segment world. And again, a different approach, like a reverse ETL approach where you go warehouse first and then the data, can be done much quicker just simply because you already have the data stored at the warehouse. You don't have to instrument it manually. Now, is there a better alternative in 2025? Let's find out. So I think we can really break this down into two categories. Who should use Segment, who should not. On the who should use Segment, there's a few things, right? Cross-platform products, basically anyone that has a web and mobile app, I think benefits quite well. You can integrate your multiple sources and then unify all the data across profiles and events and then send it to wherever you need to. This is one of the most common use cases I see. It just takes a lot of the complexity out when you have to deal with iOS, Android, web, backend data, cloud sources. Just bring it all into one place. Marketing teams with paid budgets benefit a lot. It's very easy to set up all the conversion APIs for Facebook, for TikTok, Google Ads that has backend conversions, and be able to enrich them with all the click identifiers to improve quality scores and matching rates. Again, very straightforward, very, very powerful use case that you have in Segment. Doing this yourself manually can be trickier. In any organization with standard marketing stacks or MarTech stacks, right? If you have a HubSpot, a Salesforce, Klaviyo, Heap, mixed funnel amplitude, all the standard products, it will integrate very, very nicely into the Segment world. You do the implementation, everything will start to flow as you expected. Now, who should look elsewhere? First, startups. Funny enough, startups have lower needs. The pricing may be a huge concern for them, especially as they ramp up. And honestly, they might be able to get away with perhaps taking a tool like Amplitude and making that their CDP, so they pay one tool, Amplitude, not two tools, Amplitude and Segment. Marketing teams that may not have a lot of digital spend, this might be maybe organizations that have primarily sales teams, so they do a lot of work in a CRM, and they live in the CRM, almost like the CRM becomes their hub, may not really benefit as much from having connections to a bunch of digital channels. And of course, organizations that have legacy software. So you don't have the standard stacks, the HubSpots, the Klaviyos, the Braze. Integrating Segment can become very, very annoying, and you're gonna have to maybe do a lot of it through a data warehouse. At that point, you have to wonder if you're gonna go like data warehouse heavy, maybe just go with a tool that supports reverse ETL and go in that approach and don't take the other stuff that Segment offers. That being said, if you want to go with Segment, what is the first step of an implementation? Segment is still very powerful, but it needs the right inputs. If you give it garbage in, you're gonna get garbage out. I highly recommend you check out my next video. And if you're unsure of how to implement Segment, then this video is right for you. It will kind of show you everything you need to know about the Segment implementation, the step-by-step, the things to note, the technical details, all in a single place. So check out that video here. You can click on it and get to know exactly what you need to implement Segment. My name is Ruben Ugarte. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.